Hey everybody, Ito here with my new show, Strictly Arcade, where, as the title suggests, we talk about arcade games. So my goal with the show is to really inform the viewers about the arcade games rather than review them, and let the viewers decide if it's something they would like to try or not. In addition, I plan on doing some how-to videos on arcade hardware, so look for that too. Lastly, I do want to say this is mainly going to be a more serious show, but from time to time I do plan on doing some sketches. So with the introductions out of the way, let's take a look at our first game, WWF Superstars. WWF Superstars was released in 1989 and developed by Technos, who was responsible for such arcade hits as Double Dragon and Renegade. Superstars was the first arcade title based on the WWF license. On a quick side note, the first actual licensed WWF game was Micro League Wrestling on the Commodore 64 and Atari ST, which was more of a text selection based game than anything. The second game would be WWF WrestleMania on the NES. This would make WWF Superstars technically the third licensed WWF game. Superstars was available as its own dedicated unit as well as a conversion kit. The dedicated unit featured a very 80s inspired Superstars marquee, a bezel comprised of wrestlers in the game, some flashy side art again showcasing the wrestlers in the game, and a 2-player control panel. Graphically, even to this day the game looks great. Clean 16-bit sprites and detailed backgrounds made this game an almost jaw-dropping experience back in 1989. The graphics aged pretty well in my opinion, and it's definitely a game you could pick up and play right now and not be off-put by the graphics. Sounds in the game were mostly restricted to hit and slam noises. However, the game has incorporated a fairly impressive amount of real speech from both the announcer and even some wrestler cutscenes in the game.
I'll put you to sleep with my $1 million dream.
The game's music, while nothing groundbreaking by any means, is very fitting for the title. Yes, it could be a little repetitive at times, even though there are a few different tracks, but it's by no means that annoying repetitive. Gameplay is your standard arcade button mashing affair. However, there is some strategy involved if you want to actually become good at the game, and not have to keep adding credits for energy. Players can punch, kick, clothesline, and dropkick their opponents, just to name a few moves. Characters in the game can also do their famous taunts, but unfortunately only the CPU is actually able to make the characters do this. Most of the characters have more of their famous moves implemented into the game, such as the Ultimate Warrior's Gorilla Press, Hogan's Leg Drop, Macho Man's Elbow, and more. The game has somewhat of a limited selection of WWF wrestlers, but considering arcade games of this time weren't known for having expansive rosters, it's actually not too bad. It also helps that the roster had some of the more popular wrestlers of the time. The roster is comprised of Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, the Ultimate Warrior, Big Boss Man, the Honky Tonk Man, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan as selectable characters. The $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant were included as the final opponents and current tag team champions, but they were not selectable as playable characters. A pretty cool feature is that you could even take the action outside of the ring to bash your opponents with a chair or throw them into steel railings. Doing this can actually become a strategic move in a way, as it allows you to disqualify your opponents by getting a ring out after 20 seconds. There are essentially 3 modes of play in the game, which are pretty much the same. Players have the standard 1-player game where you pick your tag team and fight to become the WWF Tag Team Champs. There's a 2-player game where you can fight cooperatively and do the same thing. And finally, a 2-player head-to-head tag team mode, where it's your tag team versus your buddies. Unfortunately, there was no singles competition mode implemented into the game. The overall game difficulty isn't too bad, but the final tag team championship against Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase is pretty difficult. After you defeat the tag team champs and you receive your belts, you are treated to a small cutscene, though the game is not over yet, as you have to successfully defend your title for a few more matches to get the game's true ending. As mentioned earlier, the game was developed by Technos, the company made famous for their Double Dragon and River City Ransom universe of games. The company's style is all over this game, as the in-game sprites and animation are very reminiscent of what you would see in a Double Dragon game, especially when it comes to the punching and kicking of your opponents. One pretty neat nod to Double Dragon is that franchise alum Billy can be seen in the crowd while you play. So there you have it, WWF Superstars developed by Technos. Technos will go on to also develop the much-loved WWF WrestleFest, which, by the way, more on that on a later date. But personally, I prefer to play Superstars when I want to get my retro game wrestling fix. The game's PCB can be found fairly cheap these days, as it sells on trading sites and even eBay occasionally for around $30 to $60, and I highly recommend it to any arcade game collectors out there.